Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the government and political correspondent. And today my guest is Dr. Nick Ouellette, who is the superintendent for Hudson Schools. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Now, some folks in the community may have seen Nick and I together previously. So in full disclosure, I am the school board president, have been for 10 years. Well, I've been on the school board 10 years, been president 9. And in fact, I was on the school board who hired Nick 8 years ago. At this time, we were preparing for your start.
Yes.
And the retirement of the prior superintendent. And you were a whole 1 year into, not even a full year into your superintendency, and we had a $94 million referendum.
Correct, yeah.
And now we are here today to talk about another referendum. Time flies when we're having fun. But so let's talk about that a little bit, because some folks, may be caught off guard. Now, maybe not so much the parents who have kids going to the schools, but we've got 70 to 75% of our constituents, voters, if you will, taxpayers, who don't necessarily have direct correlations to the school, whether employees or students. And so, they see a referendum and then they think we're good for 30 years or whatever. So, you and I have been talking about this more than 3 years when you first mentioned it. So this is not a knee-jerk reaction to anything. We saw the beginnings of decline of enrollment probably 5-6 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you were kind of watching that, plus just doing the math and the age of some of our elementary schools. We knew that if it had been 25, 30 years since their HVAC and other capital systems had not been replaced, that was going to need work. So tell the voters a little bit about the process that brought us to the board approving these referendum questions in January.
Absolutely. So again, thanks for having me, Jamie. It all started actually in July of 2019 was the first time we started talking about needing some facility work done at the elementary and middle school levels. The original referendum, as you talked about in 2016, handled the high school project, but that's really primarily what it handled. The little work that was done at the middle school was an expansion project at the middle school because the middle school was over capacity. From 2019, we started down the path of finding a consultant to work with us to do a facility analysis and to also put together a facility task force. Then COVID hit, and it was put on the back burner for about a year and a half. And then a year and a half ago, fall of 2021, we had a facility task force that was led by Wold Architects to really look at what are our needs and what do we need to do with the buildings, primarily our elementary buildings. And we went through that task force, had community members on it, parents, staff members, things along those lines. And at that time, we had surveyed the community, and we also, got a recommendation from that task force, and it was to survey the community with two options. Basically, to spend somewhere around $100 million, either renovating all of the elementary buildings and getting them all up to a certain standard, or remove a couple of the elementary buildings and build some new elementary buildings. And so at that time, in January of 22, when the board talked about it, chose to kind of delay going for referendum at that time. And so in looking at feedback we got from folks, we decided that we would get some additional demographic information. And the demographic...
So another consultant.
Yeah, another consultant. So we had a demographer come in and looked at our enrollment projections, and basically that was spring of 2022. We got that information back, and it confirmed what we kind of already knew, which was enrollment wasn't growing, and that we're going to have kind of continue, best case scenario, we're going to hold steady. Worst case scenario, we're going to drop by a few more students before we start to come back up maybe in 10 years. And so really it's been, the same consistent enrollment. We've had 3 different enrollment studies done over the last 8 years, and they've all been pretty consistent with what their projections are and what our enrollment's going to do, which then kind of led us to a new consultant, Bray Architects, to talk to the board about what direction would they like to go. We presented different options, had some community meetings. November 1st was a largely attended community meeting, and then that brought us to the direction the board wanted to go.
So we've had our prior facilities manager, Jim Staskell, involved. We had our current facility manager reviewing this. We've had Kraus Anderson reviewed the facilities, and so they have engineers on staff.
Yep.
And, so we had engineers look at it. We had 2 architects.
Yep.
We had a public task force. And you mentioned the survey. And when those options were surveyed, what was kind of the financial tolerance, if you will, of the community?
Yeah,
because I know that was important for the high school referendum.
Yeah, the financial tolerance of the community was about $50 million. So the options that were being presented based on the facility task force just really didn't fall into that realm. And so went back to the drawing board and looked at some new options. And that's where the board came with the current option, which is, we know that there are some buildings we may need long-term and some buildings we may not, but to at least focus on the buildings that we know that we're going to need for a very long time, and that's North Hudson, EP Rock, and the middle school.
Now, you had mentioned that in the options that were reviewed, there was talk about closure of buildings, and there was not just because of the decline in enrollment, but that decline in enrollment has impact not just on how many buildings we have, but also on our budgeting process.
Absolutely.
And then that, which leads us to the first question we're going to talk about. So talk a little bit about the impact of that latest enrollment study and also that November 1st meeting with the community.
Yeah, so essentially the enrollment study showed us continuing to have some decline in enrollment at the elementary level. And so, there was some conversation around potentially closing 2 of our 6 elementaries. We got feedback at the community meeting November 1st, and at that time the board said, hey, we're willing to wait 3 years because I think there were people in the community that felt like our enrollment could be down because of COVID, and give it a little more time and you're going to see it rebound. And so the board made a commitment at that time to wait 3 years before addressing or potentially closing buildings. Any buildings. But in the meantime, we still have some buildings that we know are not going to close long term, and those needs need to be addressed. And that's kind of where we get to that second question. But the first question, the operational question, is an $8 million reoccurring levy. It allows us to increase our budget by up to $8 million total, not 8 this year and 16 the next and 24. It's just a flat 8 in any given year in order to meet some of the revenue challenges that we have going on.
Okay, well, we're going to go through a PowerPoint that you're using in the informational meetings that you've had with the community, with parent groups. And so, and we're going to have it for our viewers. So talking about question number 1, again, you had mentioned that this is just asking to exceed revenue limits by $8 million. And I don't want to jump out of sequence here, but Hudson does have a history long before your time or my time on the board, but we did ask the voters to exceed the revenue cap before.
Yes, 2001 was the last time we asked the voters to exceed the revenue cap. We asked for a $1.7 million increase, and it wasn't actually until the last couple of years that we actually had to utilize that authority. For quite a few years, we didn't have to utilize that authority because we underlevied.
Okay. So why do we need an $8 million operating revenue now?
Yep, absolutely. There's a couple things that are working against. Well, there's about 4 main things that are working against us. Some going up and some going down. So similar to people at home, with the inflationary impact that we have going on, we're not exempt from that. Our cost of operating is going up. In addition to that, our ability to attract and retain staff is also going up. There's tremendous wage pressure, especially for hourly staff positions. So those things are going up on us. But then a couple things that are going down or staying stagnant is our enrollment's going down. And the way it works is students, the way we generate revenue is by the number of kids we have. And so when that enrollment goes down, revenue goes out the door, but we can't necessarily always cut expenditures. So a classic example would be if I have 4 sections at EP Rock with 27 kids in them, each section in 4th grade, and next year I have 4 sections of 4th grade with 25 kids in each of those sections. We've just lost revenue, but we haven't been able to decrease our expenditures. And so that creates some real pressure on the budgets. And so, for example, every child in our district generates approximately $12,000 in revenue when building our budget. And so when you start to look at 8 kids, it's like losing almost $100,000 worth of revenue, but you still have all the same expenditures. And so over time, we've made lots of cuts. We've cut over 17 sections at the elementary. We've cut 12 staff members at the middle school. We've started cutting the high school. We've cut directors at the district office, assistant directors. We've cut custodians, secretaries, assistant principals, principals. But now we're getting to the point now where we can't just continue to cut without seeing a drastic impact in how we deliver instruction for kids. Which kind of brings us to the fourth thing that's impacting us, which is state aid and our new funding related to the legislature. And I think, the function of the formula is we haven't been getting increases in state aid to keep up with inflation. And, there's about 10 years ago, we were about, I believe it was almost $1,200 above the national average. And now we're currently about almost $800 below the national average. So that 2,000, if we just stayed, proportionate to where we're got CPI increases related to the national average, we would have about an extra $2,000 per child, in our budget, which when you have over 5,000 students in the district, it's over $10 million in the budget. And we wouldn't necessarily have to be going, for an operational referendum. And so that's kind of where we're sitting.
So again, you mentioned before that we do have a history of having gone to the voters and them approving an exceeding the limit by 1.7 million. We ended up not using it for the vast majority of that time because enrollment was increasing and state aid was following that increased enrollment.
Absolutely.
So there is hope that if our enrollment bounces back, like some think it might sooner than not, then this could get approved, but just not utilized.
Not necessarily utilized or not utilized fully. A lot of it's just going to depend on the situation. Some people may ask, is this a mismanagement of funds? Are we unique in Hudson? And it's not, and we're not unique. Just last November, there were 40 districts that went for an operating referendum across the state.
That's just operating referendum. That's not counting capital referendum.
That's just operating. There was, I think, over 80 some referendums completely in the state. And then this April, there's 51 operational referendums on the ballot across state. So over 90 operational referendums just in a 6-month period for districts across the state out of a total of 425 school districts.
Now, is part of that reason that so many school districts have to go to operating referendums is because those revenue caps have not kept pace with inflation over time?
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. And right now, over 80% of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin utilize operational referendums in order to make their budget work for them.
So where would the operational referendum money go if approved on April 4th?
The biggest pieces of the money go to maintaining what we currently have for programming. It's maintaining class sizes, it's maintaining a robust curricular offering, co-curricular offerings, and also looking at continuing to be competitive with our employee wages and so that we can attract and retain the type of folks people are used to having their kids work with.
We're in competition with our neighbors, right?
Absolutely.
Minnesota. And so do you have some idea, when you say maintain class sizes, I think folks in Hudson have had our current class sizes in place for a whole generation.
Yes.
They don't even know what's going on in other states. And you've got the experience of multiple states exposure. So what are you seeing in comparable suburbs just across the river?
Yeah, and I actually just talked to a community member today whose son teaches over in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, on the Minneapolis side, where that person's son is a 5th grade teacher, and the class sizes for him are 30 to 32. And so for us, our class size guidelines are 18 to 22 in kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then 22 to 27 in 3rd through 5th grade. And so,
and district-wide, we're about 24 for that 5th grade class.
Actually, we're even slightly below that.
Okay.
I don't think we have a single class average across the district per grade level that goes above like 22 and a half, 23. Some buildings more, and some buildings quite a bit less. But
okay,
yeah.
So we're trying to maintain that, and that's where the referendum. And you mentioned about competitive wages again, going up against Minnesota when they are still, unionized and can collectively bargain. They keep their rates continuing to go up and what they're paying their employees.
Absolutely, and so that's the real challenge we're up against right now.
All right, so then going to question 2, this actually gets to a bonding question. And so we've got the next graphic is question 2, facility maintenance expenditures. A little bit of a pie graph there. Just tell us, without going through each one of those items,
absolutely.
What is this supposed to represent?
So the second question is for a $29 million capital projects. And it's only 29 million referendum question because the district has been trying to save money to address that. And so the district has additional money to put at it to keep it at 29 million so it doesn't have to go any larger.
And that's roughly 15 million.
Roughly $15 million. And so one of the things that, almost over a third of this money is going towards just, HVAC and plumbing and electrical improvements. And then, we have improvements related to safety and security and things like that. Only about 18% of the referendum dollars would be looking at educational enhancements or modernization. And so really the overall projects are to refresh the spaces in those 3 buildings and deal with the infrastructure that's been aging for many, many years. And so it just takes a lot of dollars.
And so the main difference between the 44 million total that would be spent on these 3 buildings and the nearly 100 million that was talked about being invested in 6 buildings. Again, a whole different animal with regard to the type of renovations.
Absolutely. So these buildings at EP Rock and North Hudson, I'll speak to them kind of together, is they will get a renovation where we're going to go in and upgrade the heating and cooling systems in those buildings, the air handling systems, windows, roofing that wasn't damaged in the storm that we had just recently. But while we're in there upgrading those systems and modernizing those systems, we're also doing fire suppression and fire alarm systems and things like that.
Which is required. If you start remodeling or messing with the interior of a building, you have to upgrade for the ADA compliance as well as fire suppression.
Correct. And so some of this is also remodeling bathrooms for ADA compliance and things along those lines. But while we're in there, that's the time when you're going to have ceilings down and things like that to get access to kind of the infrastructure of the building. That's the time to replace the ceilings, replace the lighting, flooring, things along those lines. So the buildings will feel very refreshed when you walk in them when they're done, but they're not going to have the same level of renovation that we did on the high school where we were literally removing all the walls and redesigning the inside of the building. The buildings are going to function relatively similar to the way they function now, but they will have a more refreshed feel.
Okay. So not as extensive as what was done at the high school.
Not as extensive. The big things that that I want to point to: safety upgrades, definitely upgrades with the air handling equipment that allows us to bring more fresh air into the buildings, more natural light into the buildings with some of the window replacements and things along those lines. And we do know that doing those types of upgrades definitely help kids and learning.
Yeah, we have a graphic. We'll just put it up there briefly, but it's EP Rock. And you had mentioned, there's a building that was built, I can't remember which side of 1962, because that was the year I was born.
Yes.
So that building is pretty old. Anyway, but this is like 1950s, 1960s infrastructure that's being replaced. And, somewhere along the line when we had that oil shortage in the late 70s and everything, they wanted to reduce the amount of natural light.
Yep.
So some of the thinking on that's been changed. First of all, windows are much more energy efficient than they were 60 years ago.
Absolutely. Bringing more natural light into classrooms, more natural light in the buildings, changing the air, the fresh air in the buildings quite a bit more. Getting that CO2 out of the buildings helps kids learn, keeps them more alert in what's going on. It helps with COVID, obviously, as we've learned, as we've tried to, turn over as much air as we possibly can, as many times as we can. North Hudson, very similar type of setup, except the difference with North Hudson, it does include adding a gymnasium. It doesn't currently have a dedicated gym.
And people are going to say, another gym. What is the rationale for that?
Absolutely. And so at North Hudson, the reason it needs the gym is right now they have a CAFA gymatorium. It's multi-use facility, but the problem is with that, when we serve lunch dictates when we teach reading. Because when we serve lunch dictates when we can have physical education class, which then dictates when we can have our literacy blocks and things along those lines. And so by having a dedicated gym space, it allows us to schedule the building and to schedule, our instruction around what we know works best for kids. The ancillary benefit of it in the evening, obviously, great community use can utilize that facility. We have a lot more requests for pickleball use and adult ed, youth sports, all those different components. So yeah, it allows the community to actually get to utilize something that they're paying for, even if they don't have kids in that building.
Right. Even though we added a gym at the middle school, and added some gym space at the high school, there is still a very high demand in Hudson.
Absolutely.
Because you're talking, it's not just school use, although that is a high-end use.
Yep.
It's all generations. And you mentioned the pickleball, and I know I'm going to graduate into pickleball soon, but there's been a high demand. I can vouch for that as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's a little different about North Hudson is we do have a situation where we have to solve a space for our gymnastics team. We don't have a space for them. It really is something that we need to have a space for. We used to rent space when there was a gymnastics facility in Hudson, but that has since gone away. And so they're currently, practicing in a space that's not adequate. It's basically a large storage closet at the high school. So we looked at what's the most cost-effective way to address that.
And to build a standalone gymnastics facility would be?
It would be, 4 or 5 times the amount of money of what we're planning on having to spend to renovate the existing multi-purpose room at North Hudson Elementary. And so some people say, well, if you do that, then what do you do with the cafeteria? Where do the kids eat? And, we're able to kind of move that to a different part of the building that's adjacent to where the kitchen is. And the reason we would do that is because remodeling kitchen space is very expensive, as you can imagine, with all the infrastructure. And so then it really is, it would be moving into like media center space, and then we'd be looking at adding media center space on that building. That tends to be our cheaper space to be able to add as far as what the needs are for those spaces.
So it's a little bit like a Rubik's Cube, and you've had the architect's advice on this, but what spaces are the most expensive to build as standalones, and which way you can refit a building and meet the needs. Why is it important to have a gymnastics facility for a community like Hudson?
Well, I mean, we offer that sport for our young ladies that participate. It is a Title IX issue, we need to have equal access and equal facilities across genders. And so some people might say, well, just drop gymnastics and it won't be an issue. Well, we don't want to take opportunities away from kids, but also you would have to then cut a corresponding male sport as well. And so I can talk from personal experience. When I was in high school in 1979, my school district had to cut sports, they said, because of Title IX, because they needed to have the equal number of opportunities between men and women. So absolutely.
All right. Well, so that's question number 2 then. It's so 29 million borrowing capacity, which again, we would buy the bonds. We've done this in the past where we've bought them judiciously and economically, and in cases where there were higher interest rates and we could save money, we've
refinanced. And the last piece with the capital project is some upgrades to the middle school, and I wouldn't even really say upgrades. It's more replacements than anything to the HVAC systems and replacing some aging other systems in that building.
And speaking of that, because the middle school got about $8 million expansion back 7 years ago. So why didn't we do these upgrades then?
Well, at that time they weren't needed, and things were still operating fine, and we weren't having some of the pressures on the system like we are now. And so, we try to replace things when we think they're going to be needed, but not be too far ahead when we think they're going to be needed. And so, now's the time when those systems are really starting to, show their age and have some challenges for us.
And hasn't the middle school, this latest expansion has been in place now 5 years. So, and the middle school has been added on to about 3 times. So when you have multiple expansions and still have the original equipment in there, it can be taxing.
It creates a lot of challenges for us. And so we just kind of work through that. But
well, let's talk about, there's going to be frequently asked questions. And by the way, just remind viewers, I'm speaking with Dr. Nick Allett, who's our school superintendent here in Hudson. We're talking about the referendums coming up on April 4th. And so we've explained the questions. Now, what's going to be the impact? Let's say both of them do pass. What are taxpayers going to see in taxes?
If both questions pass, it's about a 28-cent increase in the mill rate. So what that equates to is for every $100,000 worth of home value, it's about $28 a year. And so if you have a $300,000 valued home, it's going to be about $84 for the year. If it's a $500,000 home, it's going to be more like $140 for the year. And that's what we think on the high end, the most conservative end. And we've been able to under-promise and over-deliver in the past, and we hope to do the same in this case.
So when 7 years ago, when we were going to referendum on the high school and the middle school projects, we were promising a 90-cent mill
That's
rate.
correct. Yep. And currently, we're the mill rate tied to paying that project off is somewhere in the 45 to 47% increase from where we said it was going to be. So we're able to do it for almost half of what we said the impact was going to be on people's homes.
All right. So we've got the explanation of then the mill rate.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're going through this material fast. You are going to be making presentations and have been to the community and to parents. But is there a website that folks can visit?
Yeah, if you go right to our district website, hudsonraiders.org, right at the top of the website, there's a tab and it says, April 4th referendum information, and you'll be able to click on that. You can get all of the facility studies, all of the information that we use with the facility committees. You can find these presentations, financial information, all of those different components, the budgets, all of that is right there. And then if you still have questions, you can always reach out to me. You can reach out to the school district, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and I think that takes us through. Now, I guess I skipped over the thank you part, and we can't emphasize that enough, because this is not a Dr. Owlette referendum. It's not a school board referendum. We are just putting it out there for the voters, and ultimately it's their decision.
Absolutely, and we know that strong public schools create help us have strong communities, and so we do want to thank the general public, because at the end of the day, these are their tax dollars that we are asking for, and that's why it is a public question. It's not just something the board does to people or I do to people. It's really asking the public, are you willing to support these?
And these two questions are kind of unique in that way, is that this is not just a capital referendum like we've had in some instances in the past, but it's not only what's going on in brick and mortar, but inside the buildings with this operating referendums, trying to maintain the quality that our community has gotten used to.
Absolutely. And if you want more information, like I said, you can find it on the website. Otherwise, we have a couple of meetings coming up, virtual meeting on the 21st of March, and then we also have an in-person meeting if people want to attend on the 23rd of March, and that'll be at North Hudson Elementary.
All right. And they can even contact you directly.
Yes, absolutely.
At your last name, first initial, at hudsonraiders.org.
Yep, absolutely. Or at connections@hudsonraiders.org. Either one of those will get the correct information to the right people.
Okay, very good. Well, Dr. Nick, thanks for your time, and I want to thank our viewers for watching another segment. I'm Jamie Johnson. Keep watching.